All right, before we get into answering your students' agriculture questions, let's just go over some of the norms for the workshop. Tonight's webinar is scheduled for 1.5 hours. Make sure you're muted until you see the microphone icon. You're welcome to use the chat to share your thoughts and to ask questions. My colleagues Sarah and I will be monitoring the chat throughout tonight's call. Finally, we have created a takeaway document for you that we will reference throughout the workshop. We're going to drop that into the chat for you right now. So feel free to grab that and open it in a separate window for easy access throughout. We're going to get started by sharing why we're here today. Just take a moment to share why you decided to join and drop that into the chat. We will use this chat tool throughout the workshop, so feel free to drop comments and questions that you have throughout the evening. So go ahead and let us know why you chose to come tonight. We'll give you a minute to put some responses in there and we'll take a look at those. So again, in that chat, go ahead and drop what made you come tonight. Awesome. We love that you want to incorporate more agriculture in your classes. That is fabulous. That's what we hope to do. Useful ideas, rural area, children come from farm families. So that's a great way to engage those students authentically. Lesson plans and resources. Yep, we've got those. So super excited. And then to learn and share with our community. Love that. Being able to present more agriculture phenomenon. Looks great. And welcome, new teacher, Lisa. Congratulations. This is a great place to start. You're already doing great here. Gaining more information on how to use animals. We love all of those. These are great responses and we appreciate you being so productive in the chat. So before we get going, I would like to personally welcome you to this workshop. My name is Angela Galata and I will be your facilitator tonight. I have 17 years of teaching experience in both middle and high schools across Illinois and Wisconsin. I've had the privilege of bringing subjects like physics, engineering, biology, and general science to life for countless students. I love being able to share my passion for science and make learning exciting and engaging for everyone in the classroom. I'm currently working as a learning analyst specializing in NGSS unit development. Today, we'll be working together and also individually to learn some new teaching practices, to hear what students are asking about both science and agriculture, and we'll hear from an agriculture professional to see what they are currently doing in the field. The first part of our program tonight will be learning a teaching practice that you can use in your classroom when you return to your classroom this next school year. Our last webinar, we walked through the productive talk and 5 wise teaching practices. Tonight, we're going to add one more to your arsenal of teacher tricks. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. It's time to learn about how you can get students using modeling with our first guest speaker of the night. Meet Sarah, a 10-year classroom veteran specializing in agriculture education in North Carolina, Georgia, and Maryland. Today, she spends her days living in the 3 dimensions of NGSS as a learning designer for NGSS unit development. Welcome, Sarah, and take it away.
Thanks, Angela. All right, everyone, you did such a great job in the chat. I'm going to ask you to get into the chat again. So get your fingers ready and answer this question. It's on the board. I'm obviously a teacher. It is on your screen. Our goal is for you to walk out with tools in your teacher arsenal for your classroom. And we're going to talk about the science and engineering practice of modeling and how you can use it to explore phenomena and create sense making into your classroom. So I want you to share in the chat what your definition of a model is. Just take a second to throw that in there. What is a model? Modeling is demonstrating or showing an example of what is expected from your students. Okay, thanks for sharing, Jamie. What else do we have? An example, awesome. Indirect learning to show examples. Okay, what else do we have? Model is a demonstration or example. Teacher demonstrates and the students get the chance to do it on their own with a teacher to guide them. Okay, this question can be answered by examples with solutions, arrows, labels, a representation. Modeling is a set of parameters that can be used to predict results. That's Lisa, I really like your definition. Lots of awesome definitions. They all relate to what we're trying to get with models. But now I want you to take off your teacher hat. I want you to take off your educator hat, and I want you to put on the hat of your student, whether that's a kindergartner, little 5-year-old like my son who's about to walk into your classroom next year, or an 18-year-old about to end their journey in the K-12 world. What would they say a model is? Speak to me like a 5 to 18-year-old. Legos, love it, Karen. Something you put together. Good job, Wendy. Awesome. Something I can touch. Great. Like a model car or horse. Something you build. Maybe, I don't know if they're cool anymore. Model airplane, maybe they would say like, oh, my dad, my grandpa has a model airplane. A model, something that shows a concept or how an idea works. A Lego, yeah, it's so cool. Thanks, Lisa, for letting me know. Like a car, like a small representation of a car, a Barbie Jeep, like that's kind of a model of a car, right? We're in the Barbie lifetime right now. Okay, thanks for sharing. They sound different, right? They're just a little bit different. And what I want you to know is that we can use modeling in many ways in our classroom, from that 5-year-old to the 18-year-old. So here are just a few examples of ways that models show up in the science classroom, in the NGSS classroom. This can be diagrams, physical replicas, mathematical representations, analogies, or even computer simulations. They're used to represent a system and the parts in the system in aid to like develop questions and explanations, maybe even generate data, create predictions based on a model, and communicate ideas and understanding. Models are based on evidence, right? The model airplane is not just made to like look cool. It's based on evidence of of real airplanes that look like that and have those specifications. They are needed to be refined or modified throughout the learning experience. We don't expect the first time the kids do a model for it to be perfect. Just like we don't expect a scientist for the first time for them to create a model for it to be perfect. In engineering, because NGSS isn't just science, it's also the practice of engineering, models are used to analyze a system and see operative flaws or test solutions to problems. And they can also visualize or refine, define and communicate features, and also serve as prototypes. So I'm going to take you on a little adventure with me real quick. Just a few weeks ago, I got to experience how scientists test models in real life. So we're going to check out this quick little video. This is my family and I in the Glen L Wind Tunnel at the University of Maryland. This wind tunnel has been in operation since 1949, which blew my mind, providing testing services for a multitude of companies. So I want you to take a second to think, as I get to the next slide, sorry about that. I'm just gonna pause it. What kind of company would want to use a wind tunnel? What would they, why has this wind tunnel been in service for so many years? What kind of things would we use it for? Okay, weather, a kite, car manufacturing, hurricanes, testing like hurricane on things, probably flags, airplanes, bicycles, a home structure, anything that flies or moves, roofing, building materials, jackets, tents, absolutely. All awesome, awesome thoughts. It's used for all of those things and more. We're going to watch a quick video about a company who has used the Glen L. Martin wind tunnel to test models for their car manufacturing company. So if I can get a thumbs up when it starts playing that everyone can hear it, that would be absolutely awesome. And then we're going to explore how this shows up with our kiddos. Okay. Oh, you hear it?
The Glen L. Martin wind tunnel here at the University of Maryland is here because Glenn Martin, who is the Martin of Lockheed Martin Corporation, was operating one of the very large aircraft factories that existed in the United States at the end of World War II. And he gave a large amount of money to the University of Maryland to promote education in the sciences and engineering. And as a part of that gift, he stipulated the construction of the Glen L. Martin wind tunnel. We have been continuously looking for the places that we can participate in industrial development as well as research efforts. Our involvement in research is important to the people we support in design studies because it allows us to stay up to date on the latest ways of correcting for the effects that are inevitably present anytime one does measurements.
Genovation is a very forward-thinking, nimble, small electric vehicle company. We develop very high-performance, state-of-the-art electric vehicles and electric vehicle components. We're trying very hard to push the state-of-the-art. Also in aerodynamics, and that's why the University of Maryland's wind tunnel has been so helpful for us. It's a facility that's in very high demand, but they were really helpful in terms of accommodating our schedule and allowing us 3 days of testing that worked out very positively for us. We developed a ground-up vehicle called the Genovation G2. It's probably the greenest concept vehicle on the planet. We use soybean resin and basalt fibers to make the body. And we had it in the wind tunnel a while back, and the data was very, very impressive. It validated our computational fluid dynamic analysis models and indicated that it would be one of the most aerodynamic vehicles ever made.
The wind tunnel has brought tremendous value. My expertise is in computational fluid dynamics, and I primarily simulate what a wind tunnel will do when I'm developing different types of vehicles and systems. There's no substitute for the real thing. And any simulation is just that. It's a simulation, it's an approximation. And the wind tunnel is able to allow us to calibrate our models to make sure that we're getting accurate data. And it's able to give us that real world stamp of approval so that we can know that we're actually going to be able to get the performance that we're looking for. We're here today to verify the aerodynamic performance of a tractor trailer model that we built that is specifically designed to verify the performance of add-on aero devices that reduce fuel consumption for Class 8 trucks. The equipment that they have here is second to none. The lab itself has very accurate force measurement equipment, and the tunnel itself is able to test a wide variety of different types of systems and vehicles, making it an ideal type of location to test vehicles like the ones that we're looking at today. More importantly, however, the staff here is very experienced, more experienced than any other group that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and we've been able to leverage that experience to be able to get more out of the test than just some numbers at the end of a report.
For General Motors competing in the marketplace, it's critical that we have beautiful cars that are also efficient and have high fuel economy. Aerodynamic development and drag reduction is critical for all of our vehicles as we try to improve fuel economy, but it's especially critical on electric and hybrid vehicles like the Chevy Volt or the upcoming Chevy Bolt. The staff at the Glen L. Martin Wind Tunnel is extremely helpful to us in providing the testing that we need and using their knowledge and experience to produce very accurate results and to run the process very efficiently. We can get a lot of work done there in a fairly short time. Most of our future product programs are actively involved in testing at the tunnel.
Looking to the future, our ongoing challenge is to combine the power of computer simulation and our power of experimental explorations. And that's particularly important here in our educational environment because it means that we need to educate our students in both aspects. Our objective is to have graduates who have knowledge of both the computational simulation and the experimental methodologies so that they can have the advantages of both in their careers.
I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to collaborate with the Wind Tunnel at the University of Maryland on a number of different types of projects. The collaboration has always been very rewarding, and we've benefited very greatly from working with Dr. Jewel Barlow and the staff here at the Wind Tunnel.
I would highly recommend using the Wind Tunnel at the University of Maryland. It's very much a state-of-the-art facility, but it's steeped in tradition.
As we come back together after that that video, I just want you to write in the chat, like, what is coming to mind after watching that? What are you thinking about the Wind Tunnel? What are you thinking about your students? What are you thinking about the science classroom? Just write where your head's at right now. All right, let me make sure I can see the chat again. Can you guys see the slides again, the orange slide? No?
You can change your view though, I think.
Okay, give me a second.
Presenter problems here. We got some really good things coming in the chat. Applications of technology design, great way to learn new information is models, trial and error, being able to incorporate hands-on and computer generated. So that's a great idea. And then Jen wants to build one now. So
For sure. It was so cool. And the coolest thing I learned from the professor is like, it was state of the art in 1949 and it is still state of the art now, which like most technology cannot say that. And what comes up to me is like so many models. There were so many different industries that get to use that wind tunnel to test their models. And the end where they said, you know, as we're moving into technology and like computer simulations, that they need to be able to understand both. Our students need to be able to understand not just physical models, but also the computational models, the computer models, and both of those things show up in NGSS instruction. And that is just so cool. Like if you are in NGSS and you want to be in NGSS, like just know you're on the right path. Like that's where science is going. So NGSS lets students learn to be the scientists. They don't just learn science, they do science. And if you're thinking, well, Sarah, one, I don't live in Maryland, and two, I cannot build a wind tunnel. I get it. I also can't do that. So let's talk about some more practical models that fit in the K-12 education. For example, on the slide, you're going to see two different models. You see the water cycle model. You've probably seen it before, either as a student or a teacher in some way, shape, or form. The model on the right is a student created model, and the model on the left is created, by obviously NOAA, the organization. So what differences do you see in these two models? Type in the chat. What are some of the differences that are coming up to you? Although they're both models of the same thing, how do they differ? Okay, so the student model has questions on it. Absolutely. The student model explained in more detail, for their understanding. The students are explaining what is happening. It's drawn more, definitely like hand drawn, not cool computer simulation. Right is imperfect and shows students' development of thought. Post-it notes are added, absolutely. One is the picture of the whole setting and the other is in layers, absolutely. Great. great thoughts, great things you're pulling up, like the question, you're pulling up, there's post-it notes, you can see the thinking. It's a description of their own understanding. The student model has more labels and indicated learning. Awesome. We're going to come back to this in just a moment. But I want you, we're going to come back to it, but first I want you to reacquaint with the National Science Teacher Association, quote, about the science and engineering practice of developing and using models that offer students sense-making tool to reason about how the real world events or systems work. So what this is saying, actually, I'm going to give you like 20 seconds to read the smaller font, and then we're going to reacquaint ourselves with the model. Ten more seconds. All right, so let's look back at those models quickly. Now knowing kind of the quote, like the whole basis behind the science and engineering practice, how do you see this showing up in the water cycle example? How were students given the opportunity to sense make this complex science content by creating their own model versus just looking and maybe labeling or writing definitions for the pre-created model? So how do you feel like in the teacher's classroom, how did they get the kids to like make their own sense of this topic of the water cycle? Definitely helps them develop their own understanding of the subject. What are things that the teacher wasn't worrying about? Putting in their own words helps cement it to their memory. Absolutely. Yeah, there are some things missing. It's not holistic. It gave them the responsibility to learn the information, but also communicate it in their own words, with their own drawings, with their own thoughts. Raise your hand if you think everyone's model looked different. Like mine would not look like that. Mine would look not as good as that, if we're being honest. They were able to explain what they knew at that moment in time. There was no expectation for right or wrong answer, just a thoughtful one. Awesome, Lisa. The purpose was to communicate and explain. Very, very good. And this is what I want you guys to take forward when you're thinking about modeling. The modeling isn't about perfection and to be what we see as like the industry standard. The purpose is for them to understand and be able to communicate it in their own words and make sense of it. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But the good news is with modeling, we can continue to iterate and change and tweak, just like you saw in that video. The VP of whatever company making buku's amount of money, he's not expected to get it right every time. He's expected to tweak and get better. Were the blue Post-it notes student feedback? So one of them is a suggestion and the others are questions. So yes, it could be, or it could have been the teacher feedback. Awesome. Yeah, make changes just like a scientist. So we're going to talk about 4 distinct ways that you can use models in your teaching. So let's review these 4 ways you can do it. And I would love for people to unmute and share when I ask you, like, how has this shown up in your classroom, or how would you like it to show up in your classroom? So number 1 is planning or engaging with important science ideas. So in this area, we can unpack standards, we can identify learning targets, we can talk about the anchor phenomena or driving questions, and students can create target models to determine where students will end up like in their learning experience. Has anybody used this as like the start of their their unit, their lesson? Anybody want to unmute and share your experience?
I would use it both beginning and end just to show change and growth.
Absolutely. Can you share an example of just like a DCI you were focusing on, or a standard?
Well, maybe not a standard. I was just thinking about the water cycle picture where if I were going to have them draw their own water cycle, then I would do it at the beginning to show what they know, and then take that same drawing and add to it, or redraw it again and compare later. I think it would be better to redraw it and then compare. Like I would keep the originals and then let them see what they had learned instead of just adding to it, because then they would refer to it, but this way they could see how much they learned that they didn't realize.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, to either allow them to edit as they go or just continue to redraw a whole new model with all the learning that they have. We also had an example of how rocks are made. Like, how do you think rocks are made? They could just say a volcano explodes. Like, who knows what they're going to draw? And that's okay, because you're getting their brain going. They're making connections. Those synapses are firing, and it's going to help them remember as they continue on. Okay, number 2 way you can use modeling in teaching is eliciting student ideas. So we kind of talked about it with the last one, like, what do you know about how carrots get to your table? What do you know about baby carrots and their development? Like, how are they grown? How do they get to your little package that you get at school lunches? It's a way to introduce anchor phenomena and driving questions and allow students to develop initial models and share ideas. So very similarly to what you were saying, it's a great way to get what's in their brain out onto paper, out onto a whiteboard, out onto somewhere where you can see it and you can kind of see where they are, which is great for you as a teacher to know, okay, they're already here, or some of them are here. Some of them are like 60% of the way. Some of them are like 20% of the way. Awesome. That's great data for me to move forward as I continue teaching this unit. Anybody have any ideas how you've used a model to just like get the brain vomit out onto paper? Love that. Lots of problems. Go ahead.
We use those webs. I can't think of what they're called, but you put the main word in the middle and then you branch off from there. And usually when I start a unit, I have them write down all their like the previous knowledge that they have about the topic. And that also like really helps me to know where my students are at too.
Awesome. Yeah. Concept maps, word webs. Working on a unit right now, and we have one of those in there. It's a great way for students to make connections of different impacts, of different, like how things are all connected, which is really awesome. And that connects into some CCCs too as well. Next one is supporting ongoing changes in thinking. We know that the kids are going to have to reconstruct, maybe they're testing, they're reevaluating, they're revising initial models based on their scientific inquiry and also engagement in what you're doing. As a class, this might be a way for you guys to identify patterns and maybe potential explanations for the anchoring phenomena. When we're getting in there, we're learning new things and we're changing our ideas. Anybody have an idea or like an aha moment that you saw with your students when they were able to get to that editing phase? It wasn't just like, here's the model, yay, move on, but like you saw light bulb moments go off as they were changing their thinking. I know you guys have had aha moments with your students. We have, Jen talked about they built bridges. Oh, Lisa, you got an idea?
And understanding that my students are open air, they're actually working on the ranch. We've had so many aha moments in the physics in farming department where they think they know how something is going to move. And then it doesn't move that way. And then they have to pull back, regroup, and make it go right. And it's just been really interesting to see the accumulation of knowledge and how they use it. Because they go through the same planning process every time, but they keep adding to the pieces to it. And my kids are from about 11 to 15.
That's awesome. I mean, that's innovation at work. Love to hear it. Ideas about building, modeling in SolidWorks, a 3D drawing program. That's awesome. Mentioning that, Angela, hydroponics projects where they watched a video of a commercial setup and were able to create their own. Dioramas, biomes, engineering, design, and practice is so awesome and so valuable, especially in the modeling process, because a lot of times we can't build a wind tunnel. We can't build like a real aerodynamic car, but we can build a model. And that's just really awesome. And last one is pressing for evidence-based explanations. So this is at the end, right? Maybe we did the water cycle at the beginning. They had like, it rains, it goes to a pond, it evaporates, right? Like they just started with that. And then at the end, they're getting to that student created model based on all of the evidence and instructional opportunities that you provided them. And this is the time for your students to build agreement in the classroom to maybe come to a class consensus model, to make sure everyone's thinking, for them to press on each other, press questions. Well, why did you decide that? Where did that come from? What evidence do you have of that for your project or whatever the model that you created? This is so hard for my students. You know what, Lisa, that's true. I bet the scientists would tell you the same thing. Science is freaking hard. And learning that at 11, 12, 13, 14 is one of the best gifts that you can give your students. Knowing that life's hard, science is hard. We got to find solutions, but we're going to push through. So thank you guys for sharing all those awesome ideas. And I hope that you guys continue to use models in your classroom and continue to think about how you can give students ownership over those models, to not just be, okay, we got to get it right, but we got to see where we're thinking. We got to see where our thinking is and how we can lead to changes in our thinking to get to that evidence-based thing. And like Lisa said, science is hard, but it's doable and it's needable. That's not a real word. You know, it's doable, but we got to do it, right? I hope you guys commit to using models in new and different ways this upcoming school year. And we can't wait to see what you and your students come up with.
Awesome, Sarah. Thank you so much for that. Let's give her a virtual round of applause here. Thanks for sharing all of your expertise and your experience with us. One of the things that I wanted to point out is, obviously, one of the things that we do with our virtual professional developments is we want teachers to realize there can be great advantage in using agriculture as a context to teach some of the different things that we are kind of showcasing here. So obviously, I think a couple of people already had brought it up, like literally agriculture systems, cycles make for great models. And so there's a lot there for that. So let's take a moment. If anybody has any questions for Sarah, before we move on to part 2 of our evening, you can drop them in the chat, or you are welcome to come off mute if you just want to get any clarification. We'll just give you a moment to think on that, and you can feel free to, again, come off mute, or you can let us know in the chat if you have questions. The waiting game now is my favorite. That's a tough one. Yeah.
That's a tough one. You know what? When you're getting admin or the school board on board for something you're trying to change in your classroom, the absolute best thing that you can do is share the value of it. Not just say, I'm going to do modeling. I'm going to do this thing. What's the value of it? Like, I think hopefully I demonstrated the value of modeling for you guys by sharing like how it's happening in the Glenelg Wind Tunnel, how they're able to do it, being able to have those conversations frequently, not just a, hey, by the way, one time a year thing, having consistent conversations about why NGSS is important, why you want to do modeling, and not to make it about you, to make it about what's it going to do for your admin, what's it going to do for your school board, to have students to come out of your school system who understand this practice, for them to be able to say science is hard, but I like it. For them to be able to say, like, I have failed time and time again with this aquaponics unit or with this on the farm, like Lisa was saying, like, that's what they care about. I mean, yes, they care about numbers. Yes, they care about that kind of stuff. But I think in the heart of hearts of our school board and our admin is that they care that the kids are going to leave the classroom prepared for career success and like personal growth. So I would just advise you, if you guys are having those tough conversations, have them frequently and put the value for them in the front. And the value of doing modeling is to make sure that those students are prepared for whatever career they're able to go in, because we know that it's going to show up regardless of if they're in science or not. And a great idea, I think Misty put in there, is showing, like demonstrating how it showed up with your classroom. How did you see Angela go from this to this? And just demonstrating how the value is just really awesome for your kids. I hope that's helpful.
I'd add to that too, Sarah, that just for you, Amy, another thing is if you're already expected to use NGSS and that's your guiding principles and your standards for your school, I mean, modeling is one of the SEPs. And if you are expected to teach DCIs, you're also expected to teach in those other dimensions of SEPs and those cross-cutting concepts then. So SEPs, again, are those science and engineering practices. So there in itself, I think is a great also like way in, like, I need to not only teach DCI or disciplinary content, but I also need to make sure that students are able to understand the value in that. So I think Sarah did a nice job of demonstrating that tonight. Any other questions that anyone has before we take a little tiny stretch break just to get up and kind of revisit thoughts, and we'll finish up our second part of the evening then? Counting to 7. I forget what I'm supposed to count to. I think it's 7, right? We're going to take a 2-minute stretch break here, just so that we can reset for our part 2 with our presenter that is coming in, and also to give you guys a moment to get a drink, just stand up, take a break, and we will come back in 2 minutes. Lisa, the document itself does not necessarily have all of those modeling points, but after tonight, you'll get access to this recording. And then there's also a link to where we got the information about modeling, which can give you some of the background understanding, like where we got that content from, if that answers your question. Dr. Launchball, I just want to welcome you before we get started here. You can go ahead and come off camera if you want. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay off. It's up to you. We'll just do your intro and then we'll get right into your questions. So we're super excited to see you.
I'm also excited and maybe a little nervous, so I look forward to it.
I feel like that's just everyone, isn't it? Like you hop on to something that's like,
it feels like the first day of class. It's hard because I don't know what the experience of people is, and I just have to go for it.
Yeah, no, you're good. We appreciate you being here, and they are in for a treat. I know that from personal experience, so you are the best. So,
well, I'm looking forward to it. I want to know what people think of these questions and ideas.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for doing all the hard work. I just have to show up.
All right, Sarah, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hopefully
Angela-
everybody's back.
We sure will. Would you be able to drop the takeaway document in one more time? We've had a few people join
Yeah.
us.
Absolutely.
The takeaway document, for those of you who just joined, have links to certain things like I talked about in modeling. I'll have the survey for tonight. So make sure you grab that. Angela will put it in the chat in just
I
a
will dump
second.
it in the chat right here, right now. Should force you to make a copy, but then it's yours. You have it. It's all good to go. Let me just hop back to where we were at here. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. For our second part of the evening, it's time to hear from students. Our job tonight is to share what real life experts in agriculture fields have to say about real student questions about science and agriculture. So to prepare for tonight, we asked students from Oregon, Wisconsin, and also from Pennsylvania to share their questions. And we are just super thankful for their participation. When you don't give them the box, you know, the questions just go all over the place, right? So we were super excited to have people that were willing to share with us. So just to give you a little understanding of how this will work, we have 6 questions that are ready for tonight. We'll see how many we're able to get through with our presenter this evening. These students gave us their questions via email. Some of them shared videos. Those were more for our last webinar, but we were able to share those questions with our expert panelist, and she's going to give you some of her thoughts about how you can answer that question for students in your classroom. And that will hopefully help you to figure out how you can incorporate these questions and other ones that are like these questions into your planning and delivery of your content. So it is my absolute honor to present Dr. Karen Launchbaugh. She's been with us before on webinars, and you guys are in for a great treat because she is truly an expert. Karen Launchbaugh is a professor of rangeland ecology, director of the Rangeland Center at the University of Idaho, and president of the International Society for Range Management. Dr. Launchbaugh's research and teaching has a focus on applying principles of grazing management and targeted grazing to manage invasive plants, wildland fuels, and livestock-wildlife interactions. Karen grew up on a sheep and cattle ranch in western North Dakota and has degrees in rangeland science and management from North Dakota State University, Texas A&M University, and Utah State University. She's been recognized for her teaching excellence with awards from her college, university, Society for Range Management, and was also named Idaho Professor of the Year in 2014. So as we listen to Dr. Launchbaugh today, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. She loves questions. That is one thing I have found out in working with her. And she's also super excited to engage with you all this evening and has great stuff to share. So we're going to get right to it, and we will hopefully take us right up to the end there. So here's our first question for you today, Dr. Launchbaugh. Is methane that comes from cows really a big deal for climate change?
Great. Yeah, it is a question I get a lot. I also want to say that I think if you're a good teacher, you have to feel comfortable about what you're presenting. So if you have questions on this beyond what you think you'll do in the class, just so you can learn more about that, just have at it. I'll do what I can. This is a question I get a lot. My classes I teach are at the college level. So a lot of students hear in the news that they should give up eating meat and they should become vegans, and there shouldn't be cattle out there because they're producing all of this methane. And it turns out that, so I've done some research on this, and first think about greenhouse gases, not just methane, but greenhouse gases, which are carbon dioxide, methane, a whole suite of gases that when they move up in the atmosphere, they trap heat in, greenhouse gases. And so when you think of that big category, so there's 2 things going on here, that big category and then methane. In greenhouse gases, by far the biggest contributor to those is transportation. Agriculture is just really a small fraction, 5 to 8% of the total greenhouse gases is from agriculture. And of that, only about half of that is from animal agriculture, from cattle, sheep, goats, chickens. So if you think about the big picture, livestock production is really not a big deal. And so even if everybody gave up eating meat, it's not going to have a very large impact on greenhouse gases. The biggest thing would be changes in transportation, like the point that Sarah had about electric cars. That would have a bigger effect than that. Okay. But then why do we worry about methane? Why do we hear about methane? Because it's, of all those gases, it's the really powerful one. It's 25 times more effective or more concentrated than carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is the most common, but it doesn't trap as much heat. So that's why we worry about methane. And of course, cows do play a big role. And I actually did some research on this because I wanted to prove that cows were not a big deal. But hey, I'm sorry. The truth is cows do give off a lot of methane. The biggest methane producer is natural gas and petroleum systems. Especially there's a big controversy now about gas wells that aren't capped and they're not collecting that methane, especially old gas wells. So that still is the biggest contributor. It's about 29%. But cows and other ruminants, including deer and elk and pronghorn and others, they're still 25%. So it's a pretty big deal. If you add manure in there, that's another bit. So I'm afraid I couldn't go away and just say, oh, it's not a big deal. So to me in the class, I use this, like, we talk a lot about models. I love your idea about models, Sarah. We have lots of models about how carbon from plants goes into the rumen and then gets torn apart by those rumen microbes. One of the big effluents is methane from belching and burping. It's not from beyond, it's not farts, it's burps. So to me, that's interesting. We do things like bring rumen fluid into the classroom and actually watch it produce methane and stuff, which is pretty interesting because it's just a natural process. It's a beautiful process, I think, because we're taking something that we humans cannot eat. We're giving it to microbes that are housed inside of a cow, and it's turning into something that we can eat. So I like the beautiful process, but the side effect is methane. So I guess now, as I think about it, it's not a big deal, but it's a deal. There's a lot we can do about it. I've been reading, I've been listening. For example, what diet an animal's on will change how much methane they produce. Recently was in on a group of scientists, and they're looking at genetics. Some breeds of livestock produce more than others. There's things you can add to the diet to reduce it, to reduce the methane production. And then there was just a study the other day that methane is a byproduct. If the animals didn't have it, it would be a good thing. They would be more productive instead of producing this. So my modern view on this is it's an important, don't denigrate it. It's a deal, but there's a lot we can do about it. And I think it puts us as agriculturalists, as scientists, put us to the task, see what we can do about it. I feel like it's maybe not a solvable problem, but it's an addressable problem. So that's my take on methane. I thank you. And Angela, I'm not watching the chat. I can like do one thing at a time. So if you
I remember, yeah, I got you. So we do have a couple of things that maybe if you wanted, if you're able to address them, that's great. Some people you mentioned about feed additives. One of the things that was in the chat a couple of times was about seaweed. Do you know anything about the addition of seaweed to cattle feed that can help reduce methane? If you don't, again, totally.
Yeah, no, that's an very interesting one, because seaweed, which we really can't use in a lot of other ways. I don't know exactly the percentages, but it's not a huge percentage that can be added to the feed, and then it can really reduce the methane. And this is especially effective in like dairies, or especially small dairies. It's a really good way for feed operations to do it. Not so much on rangelands, but in dairies and in feedlots. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Who'd have thought it? Seaweed, that's amazing. And now the next step is why. So where the researchers are going on, okay, seaweed, cool. What is it about seaweed that's causing that? And so I've read some stuff about, once they figure out why that is, we might be able to do things like sprinkle compounds on or put boluses in cows' guts. So I'm very excited about seaweed.
That's super cool. Also in the chat, there was, do you know of any other places that are doing, any other like institutions, universities that are doing some of the big research around this? that maybe a teacher might be able to find some information? Or is it just kind of like everybody's doing their own thing?
California, I think, is taking the lead. Matt Lurham's lab at UC Davis, that's where I've seen the best work, really the most comprehensive work. Some of the genetics work is coming out of North Carolina. So it's really being done by the land-grant universities. That's what I'm seeing. But a few labs are bigger than others. And I think it needs to be done everywhere. And most of the work is done on cattle. We don't know much about sheep. I remember wildlife are ruminants too, and we don't know hardly anything about methane production from elk or things like that. So I think we got a ways to go on that. Another interesting thing about greenhouse gases and methane is wetlands. We always want to preserve wetlands, but they produce a lot of methane. So I think it's going in two ways. How can we change the animal or the environment in the feedlot or on the range to reduce it, but then also to be honest about other places in the environment where methane and greenhouse gases come from. So that's where I see most of the work being done.
Awesome. Just to point out, everybody, if you have any questions, you guys have done a great job so far of putting those into the chat, and we'll try to address some of them with Dr. Launchball here. We're going to go to our next question for tonight, just because we want to make sure we get you a lot of information. So the next question we have is, what does sustainable agriculture mean to you?
When I hear sustainable, the first thing that comes to mind is the next generation. Most definitions, certainly the one that I believe and what I hear mostly, is managing land, producing crops, using lands in a way that we still have water, food, recreation, and other resources for the next generation. So that's the key element there. What I do, the way I look at it in my classes is really to help students think about what are those resources we're going to need in the future. I think wind and solar power is something that's been changed really radically in my lifetime. Windmills have been around a lot, but not those huge wind turbines. And it's because the future generation needs, when I was a kid, the future generation needed more energy. And so this is how our lands are providing that. So I like to try to think of sustainability as the way we're doing things to change things in a future that we don't know. So I try to focus on how can we help people think about the future. Clean water. We're going to need clean water as long as we're on Earth. We're going to need food. We're going to need other things in the environment. So that's my definition of sustainable agriculture, is using things in a way that are good for a future that we can't really know about. The other thing that intrigues me, and again, since it's summer here and that we're hearing a lot about gardens, and I've been at the farmers market, I really like the idea of many modern agricultural and gardening practices are working with nature. And so they really try to harness these natural processes, the water cycle, the carbon in the soil. Permaculture is a good example of trying to add as few chemicals, as few disturbance of the soil, so that you're still producing that. And that's where I see a lot of agriculture is heading that way. Yeah, sure, we're still using the innovations of technology. We're still using chemicals and tractors and stuff, but a lot of it's about trying to minimize the input. So some of the newest, coolest agriculture that I'm following is really to harness ecology and focus less on kind of agronomic practices. And I think that ties right into sustainability. And I love it. Xeriscaping, permaculture, also this huge interest in soil microbes. Man, there is so much that is happening in the soil with the soil microbes and hyphae from fungi. And now we're starting to realize that is a part of really kind of keeping the land going and producing really high quality food. I was, in fact, in one of my classes, I know it's come up in this discussion, it's less and less people are in agriculture. I grew up on a ranch. I got lucky. I didn't do anything to get there. I just was kind of born there. So it just happened. Today, there's a lot more urban people, so they don't have that opportunity. So on my field trips, we get in a van and we go talk to ranchers, we go talk to agriculturists. And we talked to a rancher near Missoula, Montana this year, and he got us into his office. Like all of us were stuffed in his office, and on his desk, he has a computer, fine. And he also has a microscope, and he goes on for 20 minutes about all the little microbes in the soil. And I thought that was so cool that here's a rancher farmer that he is just into soil microbes and carbon. So a really nice movement in agriculture now is re-empowering nature for sustainability. So now you've heard it, start thinking about it. I'd love to hear if you guys have examples of that. But in my world, that's sustainability. It's staying natural.
Yeah, does anyone want to come off mute and share any sustainability examples with Dr. Launchball? You're welcome to do that. Or you can drop them in the chat. Yvonne in the chat said, what other countries are making policies and useful changes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? I think that ties into this sustainability conversation that we're having here. So if you have any understanding of that, we'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah, so since I'm a rangeland professor, of course, I follow a lot of stuff in Australia because it's 80-some% rangeland. So a lot of good work is coming out of Australia. Also quite a bit of Europe, in Europe, and some of the work that's coming out of those countries is also talking a lot about fire, because if you can stop fires or manage fires, of course, you're releasing a lot less carbon. So that's kind of another interesting nexus in managing wildlands, like in Australia, is a real connection to other processes like fire.
Anybody have any other questions? You can, again, feel free to drop in the chat. You are welcome to also come off mute if you have any. We'll wait for just a moment here. All right, teacher pause. Again, feel free to drop these in the chat. We'll also have Dr. Launchball hang out for a couple minutes with us. I'm sure she'll answer more questions at the end if you think of something.
And I like the comment about no-till farming, and that's becoming a very common. It was new when I was in school, and now it's like a lot of people do it. The other thing that is really cool is I'm sad that when I was young, almost every farm had some livestock on it. And there was this great union between animal agriculture and crop agriculture. And then it went away. And there were bigger ranchers and farming, the economies of scale. Another great trend, not only no-till farming, but this reuniting of animal and crop agriculture. So we're starting to see cows do things for the environment, like eat crop aftermath, eat weeds, fertilize the soil, aerate it. So I love that. I mean, that's the next beyond no-till, is like, let's get cows and sheep out on the ground again. That's exciting.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so our third question then tonight is, how can we support productive rangelands?
Okay, well, so start thinking about what are rangelands to you? First, I mean, I don't know that everyone knows what rangelands are. So start thinking about that. I'll tell you what I think they are, and then we'll talk about what you might be able to do.
Yeah, you can feel free to drop those responses in the chat too. I can call them out here for Dr. Launchball for you guys.
Yeah, I've spent my whole life in this profession that covers half of the Earth's land surface. It covers half of the West. It covers half of Idaho. It's everywhere. And people don't know what it is. I mean, I love it when I get on a plane and someone says, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a university professor. Oh, what do you teach? I teach rangeland ecology. Oh, well, that's nice. I mean, like, they have no idea what it is that I teach. So what's
in the chat, Jen dropped in open fields was one of the responses that's there in the chat.
Oddly enough, that is one of the best ways to describe rangeland. It's one that where you can see a long ways. We have open landscapes. So if you grew up in a forest, that might be very uncomfortable to you. But if you grew up in the plains where I did, it's very normal. There's a great cowboy, old unknown cowboy said that rangelands are where there's more cows and less butter, more rivers and less water, and you can go further and see less than anywhere else in the world. So the idea that you can just really go far and there's just nothing between you and the horizon. I did catch that last one about grazing. Grazing is inherently important on rangelands. but not all rangelands are grazed by livestock. It's grazed by something. It could be insects, it could be wildlife, it could be something. So grazing is an inherently important ecological process, as is fire on rangelands. But not all rangelands are grazed by livestock. So grazing land and rangeland are not synonymous. So I would say that the first thing you could do to support productive rangelands is learn about them. Don't be afraid to look at some pictures and ask yourself, it's rangeland. That's my first day in class. We just throw pictures up on the wall and I ask them what's rangeland, what's not. And again, I take a global view. This is a really cool topic to help people explore the land, because it is half of the Earth's surface. I mean, every continent has rangelands. And so first learning about it. Then I think it's looking in your backyard. Idaho has a lot of rangelands, but all the big towns in Idaho are in rangeland. So it's usually right outside the back door. And once you know it, you start to really see it. So asking more about the food and lands, and visit rangeland. It's not a far away. It's usually just at the edge of town. So anytime you could see for a distance and you're not in a dense forest, you're in rangeland if you get out of the city. And so start asking questions. Also, I'm sad that not many people really understand ranching anymore. When I grew up, all my friends, we all ranched. If you were a city kid, you still knew everybody who hung out at the ranch. Not so much anymore. So talk to ranchers. My field trips in college have gone from kind of helping ranchers do stuff to just learning from ranchers. So talk to ranchers. When I go to the farmer's market, okay, I love range, so that maybe I'm not a good example, but I ask these people that are selling meat, like, where's the ranch? What do they do? What do they care about? So it's, Lisa was one that has her class out on the range. I'm really inspired by that. But bringing ranchers into your classrooms, you'd be surprised how many students have never met a rancher. They don't know what they do. And so I think it's a really good way to not focus on the kind of the textbook part of it, but the applied science, the people who had to do it on the ground, had to understand it. So that's my thing, is be brave. Get out there, bring them into the classroom, visit. I think at the heart of this is ask questions. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'd love someone to help me, is how do you help people ask questions? I always have questions, and I think it's because I grew up ranching and just always wondering why that did that. Why doesn't it? And so I don't know how to help my students ask questions. Like, how do you get into this mode? It's a skill. It's just a skill like public speaking, asking questions. So anyone got some ideas on that? I'm all ears. Okay, the next steps, here's Karenisms. So you may or may not like these. I'd love it if you'd argue with you, but here's what I think. As far as policies for rangelands, for me, it's all about working landscapes. It's not about taking the cows off or the crops off. It's about working landscapes. Preservation, I don't think is going to get us anywhere. It's not about putting lands in a jar and saving them for the future. They're working lands. They have natural processes. They have natural abilities to recover from disturbance. So we need to keep that open space, which was brought up. And the way we're going to do that is really by keeping these lands working. Keeping ranchers out there, keeping people out there hiking, biking, recreating. I have mixed feelings about windmills and solar panels, but they're important and they need that wide open space. And if it's not that, then it will be roads and houses. So we got to keep these lands working. There's a lot of ways to do it. And if you want a challenging job, then that's keep the working lands working. And then again, I part with questions. The things that are changing on rangelands is just make sure it's not just cows. It's not just cows. It's wildlife. It's renewable energy. It's clean water. It's recreation. These are wide open lands. They're good for everything. And you are not doing your job on rangelands if you are not trying to do more than one thing. It's multitasking. It's trying to do several of those at once. So that's what I think about supporting rangelands, is trying to understand them and explore them.
Awesome. we did have a couple of questions that came through the chat, so I want to make sure we take a look through those. There was one that was in there from Karen, and she asked about the movement to reestablish grasslands in areas that once were. How does that practice fit into rangelands?
Oh, super good. Because we've lost so many of the grasslands. The grasslands were great places to put a plow down. So, they're one of the most endangered ecosystems. The tall grass prairie, the Palouse prairie where I live are almost gone because they were good farmland. And so many efforts are about how can we restore this? My take home message there, it is harder than it sounds. It's really, you can get plants back, you can get grasses back, but we're still not seeing that diversity in the healthy ecosystems like we would have if we had never plowed it up or turned it into houses or roads. So my theory, my strong conviction on this, let me change that wording, is absolutely. The more we can get lands back to perennial, especially grasslands, that will help soil carbon, that will help microbes, but it won't be the prairie that was there before. So the other part of that is keep what you have. Let's this in the plains, especially South Dakota, North Dakota, they're still losing prairies, even though we know how important prairie ecosystems are. They're still losing them every year. And so keep what you got, restore the rest. There's 3 principles of the Range Society believes there's 3 principles for ecosystem services. One is to avoid conversion, and one is to adaptively manage what you have and then restore it. You got to do all 3 of those.
Also, someone, Karen, in the chat posted about the insects that have been part of prairie ecosystems. Can you speak to the impact of that? Like they were part of that ecosystem and have we lost those insects? Are they still helping? Thoughts on that?
Oh man, I wish I knew more about insects. I love, that's a great question. Like I'm very interested in soil microbes, and insects are like right behind that. Okay, so a couple of things that are happening on that movement is, I think the pollinator, the awareness of pollinators, and that has really pushed us to think a little bit beyond pollinators. Now, at least we're starting to think about the importance of insects. But then what's beyond that? Recycling insects like dung beetles and other beetles, ants are really important. And so a couple of things we're finding about that. I actually am doing some research that just really surprised me. I have a pretty big project on, I'm working with a team on sage grouse, which is a bird that's out here in the West that many people are worried because its populations have declined, and it's been petitioned for listing under the Endangered Species Act a few times, and it's still a concern. So a lot of people said, let's get the cows off. So our study is like, could cows and sage grouse be compatible? And what we found out, and this is interesting, so sage grouse need insects, because if they don't eat insects in their first few days of life, they don't get enough protein to live. So those little chicks, they need insects. Grazed pastures have more insects than ungrazed pastures, hands down. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk that grazing land with cows would increase the diversity and the amount of insects? So this is one of those cases where you can't preserve it. You can't put it on a shelf. You really got to keep it working. So that's my most recent interest in insects. And then also there is a lot we can do. We've used drugs in cattle to reduce internal parasites, which have come out in the manure, and they've been essentially insecticides. And they've slowed the use, they've made dung not useful to insects. There's ways to overcome that. There's times of years that can be done. There's types of chemicals where you can still protect the animals from those internal parasites and not hurt the insects. But again, sometimes when you find the answer, you find more problems, more challenges, but they're all doable. They're all, once we know, we can make changes. Ignorance is not bliss. It's the enemy of us all.
Awesome. We're going to go to our 4th question tonight then. Again, you can keep questions rolling through the chat and we'll try to get through what we can. How do you face criticism of agricultural practices and values?
Yeah, this is totally the way that I do things. And because I work with grazing, and because some people don't like cows, I end up in these conversations quite a lot. And the first thing is that I always start by trying to walk in their shoes a little. see what their side of is. Maybe they really never were around cows. Maybe they're afraid of cows. Maybe they have misconceptions about them. So there's always two sides to the story. I can't think I am right. I am right from my shoes, but I may not be right from your shoes. I learned this from a good friend. I'm a musician on the side. I play music. I love it. And there was a woman who started playing fiddle with us, and man, she's a great fiddler. And I had great. And then finally, after months of playing together and having a great time, I found out she hated cows. I'm like, whoa, geez. And I could not look at her and say, you're an idiot. You don't know anything. I had to look at her as a smart, really good person that just had a different opinion. So I often think of, I think of her and just think, it's not those people over there. They're real people. They have an opinion. So that's first thing. I start with trying to just think maybe they're just not idiots. Maybe there is another side to the story. And the second is that I've got to be honest, just like I did on the methane. I really wanted to tell you that methane was no problem, but when I found out that it is an issue, be honest. My sage grouse project that I'm involved in, I told it's actually sponsored by a group of ranchers in our state, sponsored the research because they wanted to know the answer. And I told them at the first meeting, I said, you got to know that I'm going to tell you the answer, whether you like it or not. And they rely on me. There are times I tell them things they don't like, but that they want the truth. And so those are my two. That's the two things that I do is first try to realize that people have different experiences. And the second is be honest. So I think that might work in all of your lives. Those are sort of two principles.
Yeah. What kind of questions do you guys have about what Dr. Lunchball shared there? Again, you can come off mute. You can drop things in the chat as well. I think what you spoke to right there, that's science right there. Like we don't always get the answers we want, but we get the answers we get. So
yeah, and I'm going to
talk
push
to
Sarah.
science
Sarah, you said science is hard. Science isn't hard. It's not hard at all. You just have to keep following the thread. It's just a process. You open a little package and it's got 5 more questions in it, and you grab in a little thread and you go. To me, I've never found it hard. I just find it interesting.
that's so cool. Any questions, anything at all that you guys are?
Or the ideas.
Yep, or any ideas are welcome as well, yeah. Yeah, Sarah says she's editing her statement just because that pressure you just put on her, Dr. Lunchball. She's editing it now. All right, well, let's head to our 5th question then for the evening. I think this is one I can't wait to hear your response on, is what are some of the biggest challenges that ranchers face?
I will be honest, when I left for college, my family sold the ranch. So I'm not a rancher anymore. I do have a lot of good friends that are ranchers, and so I get to hear their sides of the story. The first and biggest one is that, people think ranchers make a lot of money, but it's the increasing cost of production. Those are going up much faster than the price of beef. And the price that you pay in the store for beef is not the price that producers get. So that's another kind of misconception. But okay, you guys all know it. Price of feed has doubled in the last couple of years. Land prices. It used to be a time where you could say, how many cows could I graze to pay for this land? There's very little land in the West where you could buy it with cows anymore. And that's sad to me. So it's an investment. It's a good investment. Land holds value. But you can't pay the mortgage with cows like you used to. It's very, very hard. Fuel going up, labor costs, all of those. So that's the biggest challenge day in and day out that producers face, is those increasing costs of just doing the business. The second two I've got here is like climate extremes and local issues. And I feel like this is a challenge that livestock producers have. One is they have all these big kind of global challenges. It could be labor shortages, it could be drought, it could be wet springs, it could be hot summers, it could be diseases, things that are really large. But then on the other hand, they have these things that affect just their ranch, like fire and invasive species or predation from wolves or others. So I think that's hard because everybody has the whole industry has these big things that are affecting them, like I would say hot summers and fire are those big ones, but then those are local too. You might have a fire or a flood, but I might not, and I may live 10 miles away. So they're both local and global. So that's hard to make a living doing that. More and more I'm hearing about labor as being a challenge. So a new generation, a new group of people out on the ground is a growing challenge. So it ain't an easy life. It's really rewarding life. I don't talk to many ranchers that want to get out of it because they hate it. It's just hard to do.
Amy put into the chat about blizzards, and I think that's kind of interesting because that's one that we don't really think of with like climate extremes. Is there anything that you could share about the impact of just like massive amounts of snow in places for ranchers and how they might deal with it, or even just like what that does to the environment and ecosystem?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm from North Dakota. We had blizzards. I have seen animals die never standing up. I've had some friends that told me about where it got so cold that the cows actually died standing up. So it can be super cold. So that can be a serious problem. There's some things we can do about it, but when we're in those wide open spaces like rangelands, that makes it pretty hard. So that's going to be with us. And it's not that it's extremes. It's not global warming, it's global extremes. And so I was talking to some ranchers this spring, and that we were asking them what they need to prepare for. And one said drought, and the other one said, oh no, it's like drought and wet years and cold years and dry years. It's the extremes. One of the things that we're seeing here in Idaho that I hadn't seen in a long time is wet springs, really wet springs. And that's a very hard thing to calve when you're calving. You can get calves through cold weather as long as it's dry. You can't get calves through wet weather. And so that's one of the things that climate variability and climate change, floods, wet springs are probably the most dangerous. So snow is part of that, floods and snow. So again, I don't want to say everywhere is different. Every year is different, but it's the extremes that are hard. How do you plan for years where you're going to have 2 or 3 times more precipitation than the next? Huge challenge. And it's always been there. It's just more extreme.
Anybody have any questions related to any of the things that Dr. Launchbaugh just shared? Before we move on to our last question for the evening, we'll just give you a moment. Again, you're welcome to come off mute, or you can drop those in the chat, and we'll just give you a moment. All right, I don't do well with quiet, so we're gonna go to question 6.
You and me neither.
I'm so bad about it. I've always been bad about it, even in the classroom. Our last question that we want you to share a little bit with our participants here tonight is, are there really wild horses on the range? And just give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, thank you for this question, because it is one that it just opens a lot of doors. It's hard to look at these beautiful critters and not just kind of question or be interested in them. And there's also not a lot of people understand the ins and outs of kind of the policy. So it's a really real nexus of the type of animal and their ecological impacts, and then the policy, and then the human. Seeing these, just this appealing creature of the West. So yes, there really are wild horses out there. There's a lot of them. Every year the BLM, they're mostly on public lands. BLM is the one that manages them, and last year there were 82,863 wild horses. So that's a lot of critters, and they roam freely. Horses and burros are both, both counted kind of together in that calculation on the West. So when we talk about wild horses, we're talking about wild horses and burros. And so that's a big number. And one of the reasons it's kind of extra extreme is the digestive system of a horse is they're not ruminants. They're hindgut fermenters. They actually have a digestive system similar to rabbits. They have that same kind of digestive system. And it means that they eat a third again as much as a cow. So if you had a horse and a cow the same size, you've heard that saying, eat like a horse. they really do eat more. They eat about a third again is more, 25% more or so. So not only are there a lot of them, they eat a lot on the range. So they're managed on public land. They're managed under the Bureau of Land Management, though the Forest Service is also involved. They also have wild horses. And for those of you who are not Westerners, it's Nevada. Nevada is the headquarters for wild horses. There's over half of the wild horses and burros in the West are in Nevada. Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, California, Arizona, all have them too, just not as much as Utah or as Nevada. I was talking with a Nevada colleague of mine, and she said that there are some towns where wild horses are they're right in town. They're starting to come right in town and cause problems, accidents, eating stuff in gardens and things. So they've really become kind of a pest because there's so many of them. And so that's the challenge. They're beautiful. They're a part of the West. How do we manage them and kind of inspire this Western land? And that's there's no good answer to this. Absolutely not. But I think what you got to understand is that they are out there. There's lots of them. And when we put the policy together, the US, when they started managing horses, they said that we should have wild horses and burros up to an allotment or an appropriate management level would be 26,785. That's what they said. That's how many we should have that the land could support, the scientists and the policy folks. And we have 82,000. So we have a lot more. And that makes it so that the land isn't healthy. Often the animals aren't healthy. And I don't have a right answer to this, but it's a great debate. There's a lot of science behind it in terms of what animals eat and what their impact is, how much they reproduce. And then there's just a lot of got to find creative solutions. So yes, there are lots of wild horses. It's not an easy topic, but it's a cool way to explore the West.
Kyle dropped a question to me in the chat, and that was, do the wild horses pose any kind of risk to cattle or any other livestock?
Oh, that's a great question. Know that I've read into this quite a bit. They don't, they certainly aren't bullies or anything. They do protect their water sources. So it's not so much for the cattle or the sheep, but often wildlife. There's been, I've seen pictures, I've seen reports of the wild horses protecting their water sources and that making it hard for wildlife. I've not ever heard of times where there was a conflict with horses and livestock, other than that they're eating the same thing. Good question though.
Amy put in the chat, like, are the stallions or mares ever given a shot using a dart gun to make it so they are sterile?
Absolutely, great. Yeah, okay, so that is one of the solutions. And a couple of things, we're getting the initial birth control pills or shots that they gave them were 1 year. And the scientists have really been working on this, and now they have pills and they shoot them with bullets to give it to them, but it's they last 3 or 4. Some I've heard they're going for 5 years. Okay, so that is a solution, because otherwise horses are like rabbits, very prolific. They will reproduce. So yes, for mares, they're doing that. An interesting kind of side note is several BLM land managers, they partner with the horse advocates. So normally you would think, here's the land managers, they're going to be at odds with the horse advocates. And there's several groups that have said, hey, you people, you know these horses. For example, most young horses, little colts, they get named, and there's Facebook pages for individual horses, many individual horses. So these wild horse advocates know the horses. They want them to be safe. They don't want to hurt them. So they train the horse advocates to shoot the dart gun to give them the birth control pill. So to me, that's a really win-win. So science is improving, and they're starting to work with the horse advocates. As far as stallions, there's not, unfortunately, it only takes a couple of stallions to cover a lot of mares. So reducing stallions has not been as successful, because there's not many drugs that can do that. And people don't want to see you round them up and castrate them. They just don't want to see that. So that's harder.
Awesome. Any other questions? Oh, here we got another one that came through. What about wild horses and disease, and like, are they vaccinated? Is there any anything that they specifically transfer. Hopefully, Kyle, that I got that question across correctly. If not, feel free to come off mute and edit that, but.
Yeah, they're they don't get vaccinated. Maybe some populations do in smaller areas, but in general, there's not that hands-on vaccination. There are scares once in a while. A few years ago, there was a scare of a few wild horses that had a disease, and they really worked to, I don't remember what the name of the disease was. I'm sorry about that. They really worked to kind of keep those wild horses quarantined until so that they wouldn't just infect the whole West, because it was that kind of a disease. Also, it could have affected the domestic horses, the ranch horses. So there are several diseases. So far, there are occasionally outbreaks, not huge. And in the facilities where they hold wild horses that have been captured, there are really high policies to make sure that they're quarantined correctly, they're not spread, and that once they get in a holding facility, then they are vaccinated. So yeah, there's issues. Fortunately, they haven't been West-wide disease issues that are spreading rapidly.
We have one more that we'll take here, and that's from Karen from Louisiana. And she said she understands that mad cow has jumped to deer. Can it jump to horses?
I do not know the answer. I would say probably not. I've never heard it outside of a ruminant. I did hear this story about the deer. I know there's been concern about a horse or goats and sheep, but I've never seen it go to a horse. So really good. I don't know. Maybe someone else knows that one. I don't know. That's an interesting worry.
I fully appreciate that you just say, I have no idea. And I value that so much. I appreciate that.
You know what, Angela, one of the things and I don't know that it would work in your guys' classroom, but one of the things I love to do is I ask students questions and then they have this really logical answer and it's just great. And I say, wow, that is a great answer. It is completely wrong, but it is a really great answer. And because I just want to focus on the logical, they made a logical argument. And so that was one where I just didn't know.
I love that. Yeah. I feel like every single person on this call can probably relate to that in the classroom. So any other questions that we have for Dr. Launchpad? Otherwise, we will start wrapping up our evening here tonight. Awesome. Well, if you do have them, we will definitely circle back to anything at the end. But right now, we just want to say thank you very much, Dr. Launchpad, for joining us tonight. Let's give her a virtual round of applause. She is one of my faves. We just thank you so much for sharing your expertise and all of your knowledge with us, and you are just wonderful. So,
well, I want to really thank you guys. I wish we had more time where you guys could share stuff with me because it's a really two-way street. And then if you want to get any of my lectures or something, they're all at rangeuniversity.org. So you can steal them, you can take them, you can do whatever you want with them.
We love that you shared, and everyone on this call appreciates taking everything that you have because it's great. So yeah, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're going to finish up right now with just thanking our sponsors. First of all, this program wouldn't be possible without funding by beef farmers and ranchers. So that's one of the reasons that we love that Dr. Launchpad was able to join us. And we just thank them very much for their continued support of all of the professional development experiences that we have been able to put together so far. All right. So last but not least, we've just kind of got two more things here that we'd love for you to do. We hope that you have had a really awesome evening and are able to feel pretty confident about answering some of those hard-hitting agriculture questions that your students might have. Hopefully you found some of the information that Dr. Launchpad presented and also the information about modeling that Sarah presented earlier. Hopefully that was useful to you in your classroom. So we'd love for you to share in the chat just one of your biggest learning moments from today. We just love to kind of scroll through them to see what everybody kind of took from it. It really just helps us to lean into making these things really good for you guys and hopefully very useful for you as well. So you can go ahead and drop an aha moment in the chat. And then we do have one more thing that we need you to do, and that is our survey. So one of the things that we appreciate is feedback. we are, Sarah and I are both former teachers, and the only way that we can get better is by hearing what types of things are useful to you as educators. And so if you could, before you leave this evening, I know we are at time, but if you could, before you leave this evening, take hold of that short survey there. Sarah will go ahead and drop that link in the chat for you, so that you are able to share with us all of your feedback, and that the next time we put together a webinar, we can make it even better. So speaking of our next webinar, August 10th, 7 p.m. Eastern, we are going to do a resource roundup. And that resource roundup is a webinar that's going to help you to modify existing resources that you have so that they can better align with NGSS and the principles of student-driven inquiry-based learning practices and how those relate to agriculture. So we'll hang out here still. If you don't mind taking that survey, we'll hang out just in case there's any kind of an issue. We'll also be able to answer any kind of questions that you have. But we definitely appreciate everything that you were able to contribute tonight. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
If you, I'm getting the survey direct link, but it is on your takeaway document, so you can grab it straight from there. But I am going to post both of those links again into the chat. There's the survey.
Thanks, Sarah.
And here is the takeaway document. If you came in late, a few people in the chat have asked, like, I missed some of this. This sounds awesome. I want to know more. No worries. This is going to be posted on the website that maybe you registered from on the Farm STEM website. But if you fill out the survey, we get your email. And when we get your email, we can send you the recording. We'll send you your certificate for your time here, developing yourself professionally. So make sure that you fill out that survey so we can get that stuff to you.
Oh, hold on. We'll see what's going on with your takeaway document there. It should be a forced copy, but maybe it is being.
You can, Beth, you can try it again. It should work. I just changed access.
Okay.
It was from my copy of it that I shared.
Okay. Here's another one too. I'll drop in there just in case. So yeah, we'll hang out here for just a few more minutes. And then again, if there's any questions that you have, you can, if you have access to everything, you can feel free to hop off, and we appreciate you coming tonight and look forward to seeing you again. Yvonne, you can go ahead and ask your question if you want to come off mute. Otherwise, you can drop it in the chat. Totally up to you. In true teacher fashion, raising her hand. I love it.
I'm sorry, I was muted and didn't realize it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's all good. No worries. We just wanted to make sure we didn't miss your question.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Could you put back up the website that we can go to? I did come in late and I got disconnected 3 times.
Oh, geez.
So I'd like to be able to look at the video. Where do I go to do that?
Oh, yeah, we can. Sir, do you want to post the video YouTube link directly in there? We can just post the direct YouTube link for you in the chat.
I'm not sure how to get back to the chat.
Oh.
I'm not technologically gifted.
That's okay. If you're in your Zoom at the bottom, there should be like a little toolbar. And there should be one that says chat, and you can just click on that.
I did find it. I went through a different door, but I found it.
You are a problem solver. We love that. So thank you.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you. All right, so I see the YouTube link. So
Awesome.
that's where the video will be. I don't know anything about the survey. I haven't seen anything, so
Okay.
I'm sorry. And
Oh,
since I
I'm sorry. Are you
understand
talking about the recording link for the whole thing?
yes, for the whole thing.
Oh, okay, yes. So that will be if you are able to take the survey, which
Oh.
we will reach, the link should be on there. We can post it in there again. It's that Question Pro one. That'll hook you up with your email with us, and then we will send everything when the recording gets finished. All we do is just kind of clean up the front end and the back end, and then it's posted and it will get
Aha.
into your email. Sorry about that.
Okay.
That was my bad.
Okay, I see your questionnaire. So how long do I have to take that
You can take
before
it
it goes away?
whenever you would like. We will keep that a live link, and we don't have to do anything with it after that. So, yeah, as long as you have access to it, you can take it whenever it is convenient.
Okay, well, I did take a snapshot, so I'll be able to do that. I
Awesome.
put off traveling by a day for this, and now I still have to travel. So
Well,
it
you
might
are
be
sweet
another
for
day.
doing that. We are glad you were here, and we appreciate you doing that. So thank you.
Well,
Let us know how we can help out.
thank you so much to everybody. Dr.
Dr. Karen's
Uh,
amazing. I know. We love her.
Okay, it's been awesome. What little I
you.
heard. So, all right. Well, thank you. I'll get
Yeah.
back with you guys. Thank you.
No problem. Take care.
Good night.
Yep, you too. All right, everybody, we're going to give about 1 more minute here, and then we are going to wrap up for the evening. If you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. As long as you have access to everything, that Question Pro is the survey link. And again, you'll get, after you take that, you'll get access to the recording when it's posted to the On the Farm STEM site. But we, again, really appreciate you coming today and asking such awesome questions. No problem, Amy. Thanks for coming. All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and close out shop on the meeting. Again, thank you so much for coming tonight, and we hope to see you on August 10th. Thank you.